In this next section, we are going to learn how to multiply radicals. We've already seen how to add and subtract them, where we had to have like terms in order to do that. But with multiplying radicals, they do not have to be like terms. They just have to have the same root. So in order to multiply two radicals, they have to have the same root. So they both have to be square roots, they both have to be cube roots, they both have to be fourth roots, so on and so forth. So when you look at the steps that I have typed up for you in your notes, you're going to start by multiplying the numbers outside of the radical, if there are any. Sometimes some of the problems will not have those. Then you're going to multiply the numbers that are underneath the radical. Every problem that we have will at least have that. We're going to leave that answer under the radical. So when you multiply the square root of 3 and the square root of 2, you get the square root of 6. You'll leave that square root around that 6. And then we're going to simplify it like we've learned how to do in the past lessons. So when you look at example 1, it says simplify the square root of 3 times the square root of 12. So all we're going to do, since they both have the same root, we're just going to multiply 3 and 12. So 3 times 12 is 36. So we have the square root of 36. Well, we know from the past that the square root of 36 is 6. So 6 is just our final answer. Number 2, the square root of 10 all squared. Don't forget what an exponent tells you. It tells you how many times they want you to multiply that number to itself. So what this is really saying is take the square root of 10 times the square root of 10. Take that square root of 10 and multiply it 2 times. So just like on number 1, since they both have a square root around them, we can multiply the numbers. So 10 times 10 is 100. So we have the square root of 100. And we know from the past now that the square root of 100 is 10. So 10 is just our answer. The shortcut of that problem would be to remember that a square root and a square are opposite, so they basically cancel each other out, and you're just left with the number underneath, which is 10. On number 3, notice we have a square root on the outside, and then inside the parenthesis, there are 2 other square roots. So we're going to use the distributive property, and we're going to distribute that square root of 6 into both of those. So the square root of 6 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 18. Notice this plus sign right here, so we're going to put a plus sign here. And then the square root of 6 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 12. Now, from adding and subtracting lesson, we can't add these because right now the numbers underneath the square root are different. So we're going to have to simplify these. So think of those numbers that we can split up the 18 with, and we would know the square root of one of them. Well, we can split it into the square root of 9 times the square root of 2, because 9 times 2 is 18. Over with the 12, we can split that one into the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, because 4 times 3 is 12. So let's see here. We've got the square root of 9, which is 3, so we have 3 square root of 2, plus the square root of 4 is 2, so we have 2 square root of 3. These are still not like terms because this one has a 2 under the square root and this one has a 3. So we cannot simplify this one any further. So 3 square roots of 2 plus 2 square roots of 3 is our final answer. We're going to do the same thing on number 4, only we have many different numbers that we need to multiply. So we're going to start by distributing the square root of 5 into both of the terms in that second parenthesis. So the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25. Notice on this next one, we have the square root of 5 times negative 2. This 2 is not under the square root, so we cannot multiply those two numbers. So we'll leave it as a negative 2 and bring the square root of 5 down next to it. Then we're going to take this 2 and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to distribute that into the other parenthesis. Again, this 2 is not under a square root, so we cannot multiply those two numbers together. All we can do is carry over the positive 2 and set the square root of 5 next to it. And then finally, we have 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4. So taking a look at what we have, we know that the square root of 25 is 5. Negative 2 square root of 5 plus 2 square root of 5. These are like terms because they both have a square root of 5. Well, think about what negative 2 plus 2 is. It's 0. So these are opposites, so they just cancel each other out. And we can bring down that minus 4, and 5 minus 4 is 1. On this next problem, same thing. We're going to start by taking the 5 square root of 3 and distributing that into the parenthesis. And then notice this 5 down here in the front does not have a number outside in the front here. So we're just going to carry that 5 over. But then we can multiply the square root of 3 and the square root of 3 to get the square root of 9. Then we've got this 5 square root of 3 getting distributed into this negative 1. Again, the 5 and the negative 1 can be multiplied to get negative 5, but this square root of 3 doesn't have anything that it can multiply with, so we're just going to carry that square root of 3 next to it. Then we're going to take this positive 2 and we're going to distribute that. Again, we can't multiply these two numbers because this 2 is not under a square root, so we'll carry over that positive 2 and carry over the square root of 3. And then finally, 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So taking a look at what we have, well, really quick, we can see here that the square root of 9 is 3. So we have 5 times 3. These two are like terms right here because they both have a square root of 3. So negative 5 square root of 3 plus 2 square root of 3 is negative 3 square root of 3. And then I can just carry down that minus 2. 5 times 3 is 15. Carry down the negative 3 square root of 3. Carry down the negative 2. And then finally, we've got those last like terms. So 15 minus 2 is 13. Carry down the minus 3 square root of 3. These are not like terms because this one has a square root of 3 and this one doesn't. So then that's just your final answer.